Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much. We have a great one for you today. As always, here's what we are talking about today. We are taking a look a little bit of what we are seeing with the Democrats hammering out the novel plan to tax billionaires and corporate giants. New proposals would be funding social climate programs by tapping billionaires' unrealized gains and ensuring the biggest companies cannot avoid income taxes altogether. We'll take a look at some of the merits of those proposals and how exactly effective they're going to be, and really even the possibility of them passing and staying for long with likely legal challenges coming down the pike. Also, after a John Deere tractor collision, the Deere company, Deere management, has now declared all accident reports confidential, as things do not seem to be going well with the strike replacement workers over there at the Deere plant. Also, an interesting take in the Washington Post about the CNN versus Joe Rogan spat. That is, I think surprisingly on the money for somebody, who has a job writing about media in the Washington Post. We can go through that and much, much more. This is Newsflash. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into it. I'm starting with this piece here in the New York Times. Senate Democrats rushed on Tuesday to nail down the details of a groundbreaking tax on billionaires' wealth, part of an elaborate menu of tax increases to finance a significantly scaled-back bill that would strengthen social safety net and address climate change. So this kind of stuff may be a little bit of a, the kind of direct nature of it going after the billionaires here in this bill, may be a bit of a, ploy here for progressives, to kind of get them on this bill to make them maybe look past some of the incredibly weakened provisions of the actual bill. And again, the big reason why these provisions had to be weakened is because nobody could really find a good way to pay for it, which I think really tells you about what, Kristen Sinema's main goals have been here. The Democrats plan to pay for about $1.5 trillion in social policy and climate spending, could prove to be the most innovative component of the party's domestic legislation, a top priority, which is once envisioned as a transformative cradle-to-grave initiative to vault a stagnant working class into prosperity. Now, even as President Biden and his allies cut down the plan to ensure it can pass Congress with the Democrats' razor-thin edge in Congress, they are toiling to agree on new tax policies that could have far-reaching consequences. But it is still again, even when you talk about these tax increases, which are definitely probably the biggest and best thing in this bill by far, they are very likely to be challenged in the courts, and it's hard to imagine the Democratic Party putting up a real good effort in trying to defend them. And even still, we know how the courts are. They're very much captured by the right after the last 4 years, Supreme Court especially, and it's going to get there eventually. So it's really, from on its, even on its face, these tax cuts don't seem to be very much long for this world. But taking a look at the merit of the tax cuts here in the first place, they probably are, if they do come through here, they would be, they certainly sound very, very interesting. And let's just get a little bit more into this here. So among them is a measure Senate Democrats presented on Tuesday that would impose a 15% minimum tax rate on corporations based on the profit they report to their shareholders, not what they show to the IRS. The billionaires' tax and corporation tax minimum face skepticism among House Democrats who question their feasibility, and both were likely to incur legal and constitutional challenges. For the first time, billionaires would face a tax on unrealized gains in the value of their liquid assets, such as stocks, bonds, and cash, which can grow for years as vast capital stores that can be borrowed to live virtually income tax free. Borrowed off to live virtually income tax free. So that's going to be really what they are trying to attack. So it's And another very important distinction here that is very much worth looking at is the liquid asset designation, because these should be these really should be, to the very much like the most important degree, already realized, which is a little bit weird. Personally, to be honest, I do not understand. I've done a little bit of looking into it, but I do not quite understand how unrealized assets are already not being taxed if you're a billionaire. Like, how are you having unrealized liquid assets that are not being taxed already by the federal government if you're a billionaire? But again, we have legal challenges making it very rocky. If this kind of unrealized liquid assets here, if that counts as income, that can be taxed here. So that's a very, very interesting kind of legal question that makes this already a very kind of uncertain package. But also the thing is, liquid assets, that is already another very kind of like troubling thing, because a lot of the stuff that these billionaires have is very unliquid. It's solid. It's the opposite liquid. And again, like, if you want to, you can get step-up basis, which is really a big, like, way where, like, you see the billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos doing, like, that strategy where they get an asset, they borrow against the asset for pretty much their entire time they're alive, make tons of money off of it, and are able to pass it down pretty much tax-free to their heirs. And that is a big way that a lot of billionaires really enjoy making money, so that would really go right at the heart of the matter, raise a lot of money. And so with the carried interest loophole, which I believe was close to $200 billion, that's how much that would raise. So it is very, very clear. Like, there are solutions there. I think, Nancy Pelosi is well aware of these solutions. But I think it is, it's not enough. It's not a kind of incentive to look the other way in what is a really, truly awful bill, that would, somehow lure progressives back to the table and say, at least we do some serious, like, kind of new revolutionary taxes. These taxes, however revolutionary they may be, they're not going to really raise that much money. Billionaires are going to kind of be able to go around them to a certain extent, because that's not really the area where they put a lot of their wealth in. Like, a lot of liquid assets. It's just a tax on, liquid assets, which are unrealized, very sketchy legal grounds. So, this could be approved and then overturned, and there's nothing really, any of the progressives that voted for it, the insurance that, this is the thing for you, it could be overturned, and there's not really so much they could do about it. So again, it's a very, very bad kind of, part. It's not worth it, pretty much, to say the least. I don't think, I have not seen any signals from progressives saying that they have, any opinion different than that, so that is good to see. Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, seemed to torpedo a plan that required banks to provide the IRS with more customer account information to help catch tax cheats. To be fair to him, I did not see how that would actually help, because a lot of it did seem to, with the resources and kind of financial parameters that was given, it was like supposedly it would go for like $600 to $1,000 transactions. That's what it would flag and like further look into. Those are not really, I think, sufficient, and it's like that's not truly targeting, where it's not seriously targeting where a lot of the kind of enforcement is going on. It's not, and a lot of that enforcement is going to be time and time again against the people who already, by and large, pay their taxes. It's really the true tax delinquents that are just like, getting away with absolute murder up there at the top 1% of the economic spectrum. Those are the people that are just going to be completely unregulated. I think that's completely clear, because there is no IRS budget. Multiple IRS commissioners, people who have studied the stuff from various different parts and angles, have all said the same thing here. So, and I don't think that the original Democratic proposal was exactly the way to do it. So dropping this plan, though, would mean Democrats would have to find another way to raise hundreds of billions of dollars the provision was estimated to generate. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat of New York, was trying to line up support, including from Manchin, to beef up a federally paid family and medical leave provision that has been whittled down from just 4 weeks to 12. And yeah, again, really just kind of despicable and very much disappointing, to say the least, that ended up just being down to 4 weeks. Raphael Warnock, Democrat of Georgia threatened to withdraw support from the bill if, as expected, it dropped a provision that would expand health care for the working poor in a dozen states that have refused to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. So if we're saying, like, we are looking at people like Raphael Warnock, like, as I always say, I think I've said this before on the show once or twice, like, you got to look at these indicators, these certain people who, depending on what they say, it could really mean a lot from the bill. And it's, you know them after you follow politics for a certain amount of time, and Raphael Warnock, as someone who's a kind of I would put him as kind of a centrist in the Democratic caucus. We got people on the right like Joe Manchin, Mark Warner, Kristen Sinema, people on the left, Bernie Sanders, I guess Warren. And what also you have from there is people who, like to play in elements of both. Raphael Warnock really is someone who has a lot to answer to from the progressive community, who did play a big role in having him, getting him elected. Also has deep ties to kind of, Democratic leadership. I'm sure has done, a fundraiser or two in his time. It's not, particularly progressive. So the fact that he, also feels like he has to answer to a lot of these people. He knows he has an election coming up and is going to need these people inspired to get back out on the streets. Like, he is actually, you can tell he's actually operating on political motivations here, and him withholding his support just based on his ideological position in the Democratic caucus and where he stands, I think could be pretty significant. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see if there is any kind of Democratic senator who can somehow figure out their way to put more power and actually change the text of the bill in the way that Sinema and Manchin have changed the text of the bill. And, let's see if Warnock sticks to his gun. Let's see who's going to blink first. But I think it's going to be very, very tough for the Biden administration to push through the divided caucus they have this bill by the time, I think, like later this week, Biden is supposed to leave for Glasgow for the climate conference. Bernie Sanders of independent Vermont was still furious over the refusal of a handful of Democrats to give Medicare broad powers to negotiate prescription drug prices. Really just absolute indictment on them as people, really, first and foremost. And then, of course, going back on years and years of the Democratic Party agenda, what a lot of these people literally ran on. We see Kristen Sinema doing that, and I'm sure if you go back, people, vague references, standing up to the pharmaceutical industry, yeah, let's go. And then, when it comes to, like, that's all well and good when you're running to, take back the House, rah, dramatic. But when you actually have to come in there and govern, and that pharmaceutical money, those big fundraiser checks start talking, things can get very, very tough when you're trying to hold the line there. So, pretty much overall here, liberal Democrats were trying to make their peace with a stripped-down bill that would once turn a once expansive vision for social transformation into a series of short-term measures, many of which would expire under a Republican Congress if history holds and the president's party loses seats in next year's midterm. So, pretty much saying they're making their peace with, it doesn't seem like this is entirely true, here the framing the narrative, but we will see. I certainly would not be surprised, honestly, either way. I think both outcomes here are very, very possible. I don't have any kind of real check on, which one's going to happen. Maybe we'll do one more kind of withheld vote. Maybe some more concessions will be made, and then we get kind of something in the middle to, what we have now. Maybe a little bit better, but not quite where we started. That would, I would be, somewhat encouraged with that. But I think, I don't know what's going to happen. This game is very, very hard to predict. But, I think it's foolish to be surprised either way. And second of all, they should not vote for this bill. They just absolutely should not vote for this bill. And, yeah, here you literally have the New York Times coming out and saying, this bill, it's ineffective. Republicans are probably going to, getting back to the House because of this. And if so, they will completely reverse all these provisions. I'd rather we put programs out there and if people like them, then we should continue them as a government. And for some reason they're not popular, well, then that also helps people make some determination, said Representative Mark Pocan, who's a leader of the Progressives House Democrats. So yeah, again, putting your actual foot forward there, putting policies that are absolutely popular, and using political power to do so, actually expending political capital, calling these people out, drawing contrasts, making public speeches. Biden should have been behaving exactly the way Bernie was, and if not more. Because he's the president, this is his agenda, this is his party, and this is his country. He has to make sure people's lives are better, or people will punish him for it. That's just the way politics works. Pramila Jayapal struck a pragmatic note. Look, the thing is, we could have been done with this. We're done with a very different bill a month ago if we only needed 90% of us, but that's not the case. We needed 100% of us. Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, acknowledged the package would not contain everything Biden wanted, but she said the alternative. Oh, really? Did he really want that stuff? But he did a great job showing me. Jeez, I mean, Democratic leaders continue to frame the legislation as for transformational, an heir to FDR's New Deal and the Lyndon Johnson Great Society. They lumped in its $1.5 trillion spending with the $1.9 trillion pandemic aid bill that passed last spring and a pending $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure measure that awaiting the House passage. Which, by the way, anybody who tries to tell you that is just absolutely blowing smoke up your rectum. There's no other way to say it. This is not transformational legislation. This is something that, again, similar to Obamacare, people debated on, dragged out, watered down, and will only serve to kind of enhance the status quo. Hold up, just prop up all the systems that are currently making our country so shitty in so many different ways. Whether it be, private infrastructure, being inefficient, more expensive and all that kind of stuff, or whether it be, the continuation and the expansion of the fossil fuel industry, whether it be the rich not paying more in tax, all this kind of stuff. It's going to prop things up. It's going to we inject a little bit more into the economy, it's going to be a little bit better. We did a serious amount of spending. We did a very short amount of family leave and all that kind of stuff, very kind of temporary provision that could be over. This is just not by any stretch of the imagination. And people are not going to buy it because A, people haven't even been following this thing, and B, they're not going to feel it when it passes. So this is just a ridiculous piece of, rhetorical tact to take. And of course, as I say ridiculous, I look down and the quote I see next is Hakeem Jeffries. We are hopeful, we're optimistic about the prospects of delivering something historic, transformative, and bigger than one could possibly have imagined on behalf of everyday Americans, said Hakeem Jeffries, chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. I got news for you. November is going to be a rough wake-up call for Hakeem Jeffries if he really thinks that. Let me tell you, we're going to continue to follow this. We'll be back in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we have so many fun things to report here at the Spencer Walsh Radio Network that you're going to want to tune into. First and foremost, we have Newsflash, our flagship show, which will be on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, of course. And now, for the first time ever, we have the Spencer Walsh Show in a rare collaboration and syndication with WMFO 91.5 in Somerville and Medford. It'll be on the air there first and live 1 to 2 p.m. every single Monday. And from there, we'll put it on SD Run podcast feed within 24 hours. That's the lineup. Just keep listening to the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, wherever you get your podcasts. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new and exclusive Klippenstein leaks. Alright, Ken Klippenstein has been doing a little bit of FOIA over at The Intercept. Let's take a look at what he's got. It's about the John Deere strike today. So following a high-profile accident involving a salaried worker filling in at a factory for a worker on strike, John Deere management is trying to prevent similar reports of incidents from reaching the general public. Company executives concerned about, quote, reputational risk on social media have instructed employees that accident reports are confidential and must not be shared with the public, according to a recording of one executive and a slide deck obtained by The Intercept. So that confidential program is not going well so far. After John Deere's roughly 10,000 unionized factory workers overwhelmingly voted to strike, as we told you before, these people kind of being put in a tighter squeeze by John Deere as they continue to make profits by, record profits by squeezing the workforce even more. Almost if there's some weird link between the two. Who could have thought? they are being put in more uncomfortable positions, working longer hours, taking on more duties in the office, etc., etc., etc. Now they're being asked to come in onto the factory floor and being put in positions like doing things they would never have normally done. Like, driving tractors, loading trucks, putting parts on the assembly line, all that kind of thing. And they're not really having a good time with it. And now, there's accidents happening, left and right. Emergency vehicles are being called to the plant. And it is not good. On October 15th, a reporter for Labor Notes, Jonah Furman, posted an internal Deere slide depicting a salary worker crashing a tractor into a utility post. The post quickly went viral on Twitter, and management has since avoided putting discussion of this into writing. So, it's instant date, October 15th, 2021. Tractor operator was pulling an 8R into the 8R repair bay, but didn't account for the front weights, making contact with the utility post and crushing the 2-gang electrical box and scuffing paint on the front weights. Direct cause, tractor operator did not account for the additional length of front, blah, 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 blah. Going on. And this is just, again, somebody who is not, it's near miss. So this is somebody who is a non-union salaried worker who is filling in for these union workers. So this is the Zoom meeting, or I guess the conference call that workers were put on in the wake of that tweet from Labor Notes Jonah Furman going viral.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be able to connect with you again today. Happy to continue to have our Here in the Huddle meetings more frequently now that we're in a work stoppage situation with our production colleagues. But before I get into the formal items that I want to share with you today, let me just first say thank you guys so much for all this outpouring of support that we've been seeing. I can't express to you how humbling it has been for me to see employees just stepping up in every way. And obviously, with us starting training folks last Thursday and Friday, we've had new people coming to Des Moines who've never worked in the factory before, and they are showing up for us every day. We've got folks who are not new to Des Moines, but new to operations and manufacturing who have been stepping up every day. And we certainly have our Des Moines Works operations.
So, of course, you get all the buttery talk being like, oh, no, you guys are just really pulling through for us. But then you get the hammer drop, you get the chain, you get the buttering up before you get, the big turn. I'm sure anyone who's been in a situation where they have dealt with an authority figure before has seen something similar. And this is the kind of, you guys, please don't put these comments on social media.
I won't be able to share any slides. What we're going to do, I'm just going to talk to you verbally here because we've had situations, not necessarily related to the items that I've shared personally at Des Moines Works, but at other factories where people are screenshotting and it's getting out into the media, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to talk through some of these items with you to give you an update. And certainly if you have questions along the way, Lydia will be monitoring the chat, and we can get to those questions at the end of the session here. But first off,
so that is Rosalind Vox, a factory manager at John Deere's Des Moines Works in Ankeny, Iowa, on October 19th. And now, she's on Newsflash, a random podcast that she probably has never going to listen to ever. So it is very, very kind of funny how that played out. Workers in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas have been on strike for 12 days. Strikers are obviously dissatisfied with inadequate pay after bruising work schedules as essential workers during COVID-19. Essential in 2020, underpaid in 2021. That's been some of the logic from the Deere workers on the picket line. Limiting distribution of accident reports represents a departure from usual practice. They usually publish them in written form, similar to one about the tractor hitting the post, said one salaried employee in Ankeny who asked not to be named to protect his job. They would normally bring up specific cases at the startup meeting so everyone knows what happened and what corrective actions there were, at least if it happened locally. An internal slide deck shared with The Intercept by a worker from a second facility in Waterloo, Iowa, and marked confidential, confirms the directive. How will near-miss information be communicated? A Q&A slide sent to salaried Deere workers on October 20th asked, near-miss refers to accidents in which worker injuries are not sustained. This information is confidential and should not be shared outside of Deere, the slide said. And this has been the big, I love another question on that side. Are Saturdays mandatory? They're not at this time. So it's like, if that strike keeps going, we'll find out how essential you really are. That is the message there from the bosses at John Deere. But we were, going to continue to keep an eye on this kind of train wreck, this cataclysmic, chain of events that has really proven to be, it's really proven to be quite amusing, but also quite depressing as a insight to the operations of a modern company. It's very interesting to see, kind of the relationship again between the increased profits, Deere posting just record profits in 2020, 2021, and just the way that every single one of their workers, from non-union to union, salary to wage earning, it has been very, very clear to see them. They're all kind of coming together and are all feeling the squeeze from Deere. So are a fair bit of other workers across the country, as it turns out. We'll be back in 20 seconds to talk about a very interesting media story that is getting an interesting response from the Washington Post.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's news flash.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into it. Interesting post here from the Washington Post. Eric Wemple, media critic for the Washington Post, talking a little bit about Joe Rogan. And he, interestingly enough, went on Sanjay Gupta came on his podcast to talk about coronavirus and all that stuff. So he writes, podcaster Joe Rogan's 3-hour interview with CNN's Sanjay Gupta last week was an amicable affair, though it got a bit tense when the topic turned to the network's coverage of Rogan's recent bout with COVID. It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that they're conscious of. That is not a mistake. That's quite a claim to make straight to the face of CNN's chief medical correspondent, and respect to Joe Rogan. He's a person who can have someone like Sanjay Gupta, who's been very much a figure for a big sect of the population of authority when it comes to COVID, and really kind of call him out in his own setting and have way more people than Gupta's reaching, and different people than Gupta's reaching, watch it and kind of, discuss from there. Like, he is definitely a big kind of cultural kind of crossover point. So at issue of here is September 1st disclosure from Joe Rogan that he's gotten COVID, and he addressed the issue with a kitchen sink of medications that include ivermectin, a drug used for paralyzing and killing parasites. Rogan said that he got ivermectin via a prescription from his doctor. Ivermectin was discovered in the late 1970s. It got its start as a veterinary drug. Its versatility, however, has escaped the barnyard. This is an important point here. Ivermectin improved to be even more of a wonder drug in human health, improving nutrition, general health, and well-being of billions of people worldwide, ever since it was first used to treat onychorosis, which is a river blindness in humans, in 1988. Noted Satoshi Omura, who discovered ivermectin, and co-author Andy Crump in 2011 paper. So there's an animal application and a human application. What separates the two? As it turns out, a lot. An ivermectin dose for horses can be as high as 1,200 milligrams, as according to Scott Phillips of the Washington Poison Center in Seattle. It's really the dose that makes the poison. Even too much tap water or salt can be poisonous, as you may have heard. Your mother said you can die, if you drink too much water, something like that. With those considerations in mind, consider how CNN framed Rogan's use of ivermectin. Again, this is a drug that has perfectly valid use for humans. This is how CNN talked about Joe Rogan when he got COVID and said he was using ivermectin. and by the way, also a host of other drugs. If you want my personal opinion on it, just quickly so I get out of the way, Joe Rogan, he used ivermectin. He used it for humans, and he also used, things like monoclonal antibodies, which were probably way more effective. These are things like, Trump used and were very, very, well-known and effective in terms of treating some of the worst symptoms of COVID. But nevertheless, let's take a look at the framing here. Again, with all this stuff about ivermectin being a drug used by humans for many, successful human needs. On September 1st, CNN host Aaron Burnett said, controversial podcast host Joe Rogan, who's railed against vaccine requirements, said he took COVID and a drug intended for livestock. Has COVID and took a drug intended for livestock. She articulated similar descriptions 2 additional times before interviewing a doctor and noting the drug is prescribed for people as well. The same day, CNN host Anderson Cooper said, quote, one of the drugs he mentioned, ivermectin, is something more often used to deworm horses. On that same show, CNN chief media correspondent Brian Stelter said, when you have horse deworming medication that's discouraged by the government that actually causes some people in this crazy environment we're in to actually want to try it, that's the upside down when we're in with figures like Joe Rogan. Lena S. Wen, also post-contributing columnist, later added the critical context the drug is used in humans for things like parasites and scabies. That's critical context that people should use. And if CNN was actually kind of a responsible media outlet, it would, kind of have their pathological neuroses around Joe Rogan and kind of drop that for a second and just be like, hey, this is a drug that is unproven, true, in use for COVID, but has also many human uses, and you should talk to your doctor. Like, that is pretty much all you need to say. Like, not smearing Joe Rogan, and, causing kind of more unnecessary fear. Also that day, Don Lemon, probably really one of the most pretentious people in media, said the United States is now averaging 160,455 new COVID-19 cases a day, including controversial podcast host Joe Rogan, saying that he has tested positive for COVID and says that he is taking several medications, including a drug meant for deworming livestock. Bakari Sellers, Jim Costa, all going out on this. So there's a reason for reciting these transcripts. They turn up a consistent formulation from multiple CNN voices that surely wasn't a sober recitation of the facts. By highlighting that ivermectin is a horse dewormer and downplaying that ivermectin actually uses that are important for people, CNN facilitates a certain assumption among its viewers, namely that Rogan has pretty much been haunting the aisles of Tractor Supply, which, that's a very, very big statement to make that has also a lot of negative connotations when it comes to people's broad view of the media, people being unnecessarily condescended to. Notice how I said unnecessarily, but just choosing to get angry about and get worked up about the wrong things. Like if you want to say, Joe Rogan, that's unproven for COVID-19, you should be more careful in what you emphasize. That's one thing. Although I think he has kind of been not pretentious in the way that certain liberals are, like Don Lemon, and actually been like, hey. I'm not a doctor. I can say bad advice sometimes, like with the vaccination situation. But this year, I think is Sanjay Gupta was kind of dragged around a little bit. It was kind of tough. After hearing concerns from Rogan about how CNN cast the issue, Gupta said that they should not have said that on the podcast. Given that a prominent CNN personality agreed with a strong critique of his own colleagues, we placed the matter before the network's PR department, and they issued this statement. The heart of the debate has been purposely confused and ultimately lost. It's never been about livestock versus human doses of ivermectin. The issue is about a powerful voice in media who, by example and through use of his platform, sow doubt in the proven and approved science of the vaccine while promoting the use of an unproven treatment for COVID-19. Again, he used it. He was probably told by his doctor to use it. He said that. He said he also used a bunch of other things like monoclonal antibodies that probably helped him way more. I don't know how he feels about that, but I mean, if I had to guess, it's my personal opinion that, yeah, that's what probably did it for him more than the ivermectin. But saying that is also not representing accurately what you're saying. You're doing this whole, song and dance of Joe Rogan, the crazy controversial podcaster is going around taking horse dewormer, which is not true. It's just not true at all. They follow up with this great statement here. The only thing CNN did wrong was bruise the ego of a popular podcaster who pushed dangerous conspiracy theories and risked the lives of millions of people in doing so. That's quite the statement and makes some good points. Though ivermectin is used for scabies and river blindness and the like, the FDA advises against its use for COVID, saying the existing data does not show ivermectin is effective against COVID-19. Doctors have been prescribing it for COVID in any case, and some people have sought the drug for veterinary suppliers, which they, again, should not do. And, I think he said that. A lot of people who have come down on his side have said that. As long as the drug is approved for some humans, it seems to me irrelevant that it's approved for animals. I think that's very, very fair. There's tons and tons of drugs that are approved for both humans and animals, and you don't say, oh, this random drug's approved for livestock, this random drug's also approved for livestock. That is a dishonest and also, biased thing to say, because you're subconsciously going for an impersonal, you want the person listening or hearing what you're saying to come away with an impression of someone that isn't entirely based on the facts. You're kind of editorializing, leading the witness, leading the viewer, whatever. I completely agree. As long as the drug is approved for some humans, it seems irrelevant that it's approved for animals, except that it has put people that this is the way that people have gone about procuring the drug, and in so doing have put themselves at risk, said Peter Lurie, president of the Center for Science and the Public Interest and former FDA Associate Commissioner, has tweeted. CNN's also right that Rogan has made dismissive remarks about the coronavirus vaccine, and touting ivermectin as a response to COVID on its own is irresponsible. Yet CNN's statement sounds like the work of an advocacy group, more like the work of an advocacy group than a journalism outfit. The issue actually begins and ends with CNN's and the integrity of CNN's content. If we take Rogan's prescription claim at face value, and CNN hasn't challenged it, reporting, from Joe Rogan's doctor saying, I did not prescribe him ivermectin, he is just taking that on his own. That hasn't come up on CNN. So Wemple here is saying, I think accurately, if we take Rogan's prescription claim at face value and CNN hasn't challenged it, then the network's coverage was slanted in some cases and straight up incorrect in others. If you prescribe the FDA human version of ivermectin, then you're not taking a horse pill. You're just not, said Phillips in an email. So, in this instance, you don't have to endorse Rogan to abhor CNN's coverage of this topic. Here's a network, after all, that prides itself on impeccable factual hygiene, a place where there's no conceptual hair, too fine to split, no political statement, too sprawling, too fly-speck. It's tough living by your own standards. If CNN wants to describe ivermectin in a way that doesn't slam the people that takes it, The Guardian provides a fine template. A drug used against parasites in humans and livestock. Doing two of both. It's actually what it is. A little bit of a interesting lesson there for CNN and how to, be accurate in media. And a very interesting conversation point for us all. That's all we got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Thursday. We'll be back on Thursday.